The idea of Nehemiah's restoration got started approximately 10 years ago. And on a Sunday morning, we were having a church service in a little grass hut, if you would, for a church. As we were starting the service and the worship began, I looked out the door of the church and I could see this little girl, probably about 10 years old. She had on a red velvet dress, and she was carrying this big bundle of wood on her back across this very parched cornfield. She looked around the room, and at one point her eyes kind of connected with mine, and I just kind of curious to see her eyes so sort of withdrawn into her head, and her lips were cracked, and her hands were very, very dried and wrinkled. At about that time in my life, my two girls were about the same age, and I thought how different a contrast these two lives are. Later on in that day after the church service, one of the people in the village was talking about the fact that she was part of a family that had lost their parents, and the word AIDS was mentioned in the conversation, and we just assumed that her parents had died of AIDS and that she was living with her other siblings on what was left of the family farm and just trying to make a go of it. Over the years, the Lord never ever released me of that thought of her. And today, my girls are in their 20s. And I often think back to that little girl and wonder, has she survived this long? Is she now in her 20s? And there's a song by U2, there's a line of lyrics in there that says that where you live shouldn't determine whether you live or die. Whenever I hear that song, I think of that little girl, and it reminds me of the commitment that I have made in my own life to help people who are in situations where if somebody doesn't step into their life, their life will remain hopelessly unchanged for the rest of their life. And that's where the thought of Nehemiah's restoration started. We're an organization that deals with the long-term recovery or the aftermath of those situations. Effectively, what happens to people when they basically lose everything is that there's three areas that they need to be healed in order to be whole again. And those areas are of the mind, body, and the soul. When something like that happens to people, they literally get kind of sliced off from the rest of society, the norm of what we know. And all of what they've known in life up to that point is gone. And you begin to think of what it's like to try to recuperate or recover from that, from say a lifetime of building a home and a family, and then one day it's just all gone. When I'm asked, how can people get involved, the first thing I ask them is that I'd like your heart in joining with us for the cause of Nehemiah's restoration and what we're about as an organization. And then to be able to, along with that heart, be able to help us financially with some of the projects that we're doing currently and will be doing into the future. And the reason why we do what we do is because we want to spread the good news of Jesus Christ around the world. And so we can't do that without people's prayers, their love for Christ showing in and through them for others. Well, it's not just about the relief effort, and we certainly need to have those kind of organizations, but we also need to have those organizations that will deal with the long-term recovery of a person. Once they're out on that limb, it's not our job or our duty to get them off the limb, but it is our job and our duty to support that limb until they can get themselves off of it. And that's what Nehemiah's restoration is really all about. It's the restoring of the person's mind, body, and soul, so that they can recover on their own once they've become whole again and restored again.